Welcome back. Today we're discussing how to avoid lower back pain with the lift movement. So if you'll remember, the lift is one of those foundational movements that we use to improve movement patterns, build strength, increase that motor recruitment to limit the impact that goes through our spine. But as we're learning the movement, there are a few things that can happen that can have the opposite effect, that can actually aggravate a low back injury or put a little too much pressure on that spine. So that's what we're going to cover today. So if you're having some pain while you're learning this movement, watch and see if any of these tips can help you along the way. So before we get started, the other thing I want to mention is that we are discussing a kettlebell deadlift, which is going to be slightly different than a barbell deadlift. It is, when I'm teaching somebody this movement, I always start with the kettlebells. It's a little bit easier to control. So some of these can be applied to the barbell, but we are using them for the kettlebell deadlift. All right, so first thing that can happen is where you line up. A lot of times people line up too far back. And so what happens when they go to get the weight is they're really reaching far forward, or they got to lean forward to get over the weight. And then when they stand up from that position, again, I just felt it right there, a lot of tension in the low back. So first thing, make sure you line up with your feet on the outside of the kettlebell. And what that'll do is it means when you come down to grab the weight, your arms are right where they need to be and you're not reaching forward here, so that when you go to stand up, your center of gravity is where we want it. So that's the first thing. Next is make sure you keep your chest up and get your hips down. So what happens a lot of times when people go for the lift and try to create that tension in the hamstrings is they lift their hips too high, and as a result, their chest comes down. And then when you lift from here, it's more of like a hinge from the ground, which as you get to heavier weights, it's going to put a lot of pressure on your low back. So make sure that the weight starts between your feet and that you can keep your hips up and your chest pointed as far forward as you can. Next one is going to be more common in people who are very flexible or hypermobile. A lot of times they have trouble kind of controlling that spinal movement. So when they get down to grab the weight here, there's a lot of kind of this type of movement. I can't do it very well because I'm not that flexible. But if that's happening to you, you're having a hard time finding the right mid-spine position, all you need to do is a slight squeeze of the abs. An abdominal brace is going to hold that spine in place to prevent any of kind of this movement there. The next thing you want to avoid is what's called the stripper move. So again, I don't frequent a lot of strip clubs, but I've seen enough movies to know the move. But what happens there is that your hips come up before your chest. So when you come to do the deadlift, it looks like this. Your hips come up and then your trunk comes up. So it's kind of like that Tootsie Roll, right? Where it's doing this type of thing. That's not what we want. When we do the deadlift, we want to make sure that our hips and our trunk come up at the same time. So we press through our feet and stand up straight. It's not hips, trunk. The last one, a lot of times people can perform the perfect lift, but then they have trouble setting it down. So we do need to pay attention to when we set the weight down. This is where a lot of the low back injuries happen. So let's say you've done the perfect lift, you're at the top. On the way down, it's not a hinge down. What happens is you want to do that hinge, reach the hips back, and then bend the knees to get the weight down to the rest of the ground. But you don't just want to sloppily put the weight down like that. So really be careful on the way down. Make sure you send those hips back and then bend the knees to get the rest of the way down. So that's all I got for you. Those are the most common reasons why people might be experiencing back pain when they lift. So go ahead and give those a try. Let me know what you think in the comments below. My name again is Dr. Baird. This is Solving Pain with Strength. Thanks so much for being here. We'll talk to you soon.